They said it couldn't happen to the same place twice. They were wrong. A 6.9 magnitude earthquake did not just shake Cebu. It ripped through one of the most densely packed islands in the Philippines like it had a target. Highways split. Buildings swallowed people whole. Millions woke up screaming in the dark with nowhere to run. Scientists are calling it one of the most vicious seismic strikes to hit the Central Visayas in living memory. But nobody was talking about what came next. While the bodies were still being pulled from the rubble, and while the island was still on its knees, Typhoon Kalmaegi locked onto the same coordinates. Same island, same people. No warning, no mercy. In September 2025, at approximately 2:47 in the morning, the earth beneath Cebu ruptured without a single second of warning. The shaking lasted 38 seconds. Ground acceleration at the nearest Pivotal CS monitoring station hit 0.68 G, nearly 7 times the threshold at which unreinforced concrete begins to fail. Buildings didn't just buckle. They had no mathematical chance of surviving. In Mandaue and Lapu-Lapu City alone, home to over 700,000 people, entire residential blocks collapsed. Coastal roads cracked open with fissures half a meter wide. The hypocenter was recorded at 14 kilometers deep. That number is critical. Deep earthquakes lose up to 60% of their energy before reaching the surface. At 14 kilometers, almost nothing is absorbed. The full destructive force arrived intact. Over 18,000 structures were logged as damaged or destroyed across 6 municipalities. Cebu City's main port, which handled 40% of all Central Visayas cargo, shut down immediately. 3 major bridges to Mactan Island closed. Power failed across 11 municipalities, cutting electricity to 1.2 million residents. Casualties were still climbing when the sun came up. Within 48 hours, 50LCS had recorded 127 aftershocks, 21 exceeding magnitude 4.5 and 3 crossing magnitude 5.0. But the number was not what alarmed seismologists. It was the pattern. Normal aftershock sequences follow Omori's law. Frequency drops by roughly 50% each day. What FIVOLX was seeing in Cebu was a flattening decay curve. The aftershocks were not fading on schedule. That pattern carries a statistically elevated probability of a secondary major rupture within 30 days. Scientists were not saying it publicly. The data was saying it for them. Satellite radar imaging confirmed vertical ground displacement of up to 83 centimeters across a 22.4 kilometer fault segment. Horizontal displacement in localized zones reached 31 centimeters. The ground had not just shaken, it had permanently moved. Parts of Cebu now occupy a physically different position than they did before September 2025. Liquefaction was confirmed across 4 coastal municipalities, covering 3.7 square kilometers. Structures built on liquefied soil do not crack. They sink and disappear. Researchers comparing this event to the 1990 Luzon earthquake, magnitude 7.8, 25 kilometers deep, 1,719 dead, noted that Cebu's rupture struck at nearly half that depth, directly beneath a far higher population concentration. The numbers told a story no official statement was prepared to say out loud. 6 weeks after the earthquake, Cebu was not recovering. It was barely holding. 68,400 displaced residents were packed into 112 evacuation centers, built for a combined capacity of 39,000. The system was running at 175% of its limit. Water rationing was active across 9 municipalities. 231 bridges and road segments had been red tagged, leaving 17 barangays with zero reliable road access. The National Economic and Development Authority placed direct losses at 87.4 billion Philippine pesos, roughly 1.5 billion US dollars. Infrastructure represented 61% of that figure. The number was still being revised upward when the next threat appeared on satellite. In November 2025, meteorological monitoring networks flagged a tropical disturbance forming at 12.4 degrees north, 131.8 degrees east, over 1,000 kilometers east of Mindanao. Sea surface temperatures in the formation zone read 31.2 degrees Celsius. The development threshold for tropical cyclones is 26.5 degrees Celsius. Kalmaegi was forming in water nearly 5 degrees above that line. When forecasters ran the first track models, the projected path pointed directly at the Central Visayas, directly at Cebu, directly at 112 overcrowded evacuation centers, and 231 broken roads, and the same island that had not yet stopped shaking. Pagasa raised tropical cyclone warning signal number 4 over Cebu province at 4:15 in the morning, 19 hours before the projected landfall. By that point, Kalmaegi had already become one of the most intense storms to approach the Philippines since Haiyan. Maximum sustained winds at the eyewall reached 215 kilometers per hour. Gusts hit 265 kilometers per hour. Central pressure dropped to 908 hectopascals, placing Kalmaegi in the same intensity bracket as Typhoon Goni in 2020, which made landfall with the highest wind speed ever recorded for a landfalling tropical cyclone on Earth. The eye measured 42 kilometers wide. The storm's destructive wind field extended 380 kilometers from center, meaning Cebu would be under sustained assault for over 14 consecutive hours. Storm surge projections showed inundation heights of 5.4 meters along Cebu's eastern coastline, the same coastline where liquefaction had already destabilized 3.7 square kilometers of ground just 6 weeks earlier. For reference, Haiyan's surge in Tacloban in 2013 reached between 5 and 7 meters and killed thousands in hours. Mandatory evacuation covered 420,000 residents across 68 coastal barangays. But 38% of Cebu's critical road network was still damaged from the earthquake. Evacuation compliance in the worst-hit municipalities reached only 51%. Nearly half the people ordered to leave had nowhere to go, and no way to get there. Kalmaegi did not make landfall on a functioning island. It made landfall on a geological and infrastructural crime scene that had not been cleared. Storm surge waters, moving at over 40 kilometers per hour, flooded directly into evacuation centers still housing earthquake survivors. Structures with documented earthquake damage, including cracked load-bearing walls, compromised foundations, and red-tagged roof lines, were then subjected to winds of 200 kilometers per hour for 11 continuous hours. Rainfall over 36 hours reached 840 millimeters, nearly Cebu's entire combined average for October and November, delivered in a day and a half. That rainfall triggered 114 landslide events across the province. 47 of those hit populated areas or critical road corridors directly. The combined death toll from both events climbed into figures that disaster analysts described as among the worst compounded casualty numbers in Philippine history, since Haiyan killed an estimated 6,300 people in 2013. Total losses from the earthquake and Kalmaegi combined were assessed at over 212 billion Philippine pesos, approximately 3.6 billion US dollars, from one island in under 60 days. 2 catastrophes. 1 island, 0 recovery window. Scientists who model compound disaster risk assign this type of sequential multi-hazard event a probability so low that most emergency planning frameworks do not account for it. Cebu did not get a framework. Cebu got the reality. No mercy. Not even close. What happened to Cebu in the final months of 2025 is not just a tragedy. It is a data point in a pattern that scientists have been warning about for over a decade. The Philippines records more than 20 typhoons per year. It sits along the Pacific Ring of Fire, a seismic corridor responsible for 90% of the world's earthquakes. Ocean temperatures in the Western Pacific have risen 1.4 degrees Celsius since 1980, and every fraction of a degree feeds more energy into every storm that forms above it. The intervals between catastrophic events are not staying the same. They are shrinking. Subscribe now, because the next warning is already being measured on instruments somewhere. The only question is whether anyone is paying attention.